Okay, so now we're going to use the Osmosis Bounding Box app, which is this here titled Osmosis BB or Bounding Box. So this app will allow you to trim any OpenStreetMap map file to any region specified by a bounding box, and the bounding box uses latitude and longitude for coordinates. So first off, you need to download an OpenStreetMap map file. So one of the best websites that I've found to do this with is GeoFabric. So you can go to download.geofabric.de, and you will see all these different maps in osm.pdf. So it also highlights the region of the map over here. So for example, we can go to North America, and then it has all these states, a few subregions of the U.S. And Canada. Annoyingly, it doesn't have a map of the entire United States. So when I went to do the South Central region, it was annoying because I had to download the entire North America region and then trim it down to the South Central region.
So it does have Canada and Mexico, but not the U.S.
Mexico, yes.
They have like multiple states. They don't have like the entire United States. Oh, this one says U.S. West.
Yeah, regions, but not the whole
country.
Yeah. US.
Yeah, if you search hard enough, maybe you can find an OSM PBF map file for the entire US.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you need the entire US, you'll have to download a North American latest. Actually, here. So what you want is actually the osm.pbf file, not this and not this. You want this one. So you download whichever state you want, whatever region you want. Then upload that to your data depot from the data depot page. And then what you will do, so I'm not going to use any specific files for this, but I'm going to go over how you would use it in an actual case. So after you upload that map file to your data depot, well, first of all, it might be especially if you're using the North America latest, it might be too large. And in that case, you're going to want to use SCP from the command line to transfer that. So, for example, there's an example for Stampede. I forgot what the URL for Corral is. Well, actually, you can do this either in Windows or in Ubuntu. It doesn't matter. For example, you do SCP, your file name, I think, then space, and then put in the SSH URL. And that will transfer the file to the root directory of Stampede2, for example. So if you want to, for the data depot, you're going to want to transfer the file to Corral. So you're going to want to go to the TAC user portal. So just, actually I can show it. Go to the TAC user portal, go to documentation, go to Corral, and And somewhere in here it will tell you how to transfer from the command line. So for example, here, do SAP file name, and then in this case it would be MarioC2 at data.tac.utexas.edu / the path to your project directory. And that's if the file is too big to upload in a portal. I think for some of these states, it'll probably be small enough that the portal will, you can upload it to the portal. But if it's more than a few gigabytes, you'll probably have to go through the command line. So then after you upload that to your data depot, and you're in the app form, you're going to look for the file in your data depot browser and then drag and drop into here. And again, that's the osn.pbf file. So next, you're going to want to go to some mapping software. For example, you can just go to Google Maps. And then you can find the latitude and longitude of the top, bottom, and the left and right sides of the bounding box. So for example, you can just click anywhere, and then down here you have the latitude and the longitude. So I always forget which one is which. 36. So for example, the top, I think, is the latitude. Yeah. So, and this only works for rectangular boxes. So for example, if you want a box like here, the top of the box to be aligned like that, you click on where you think the line would be, and then you get the latitude here, 36, and then you would put that in this field. So then do a similar thing for the bottom of the bounding box. If the line of the bottom of the bounding box is like here, for example, click along the line, and then you see the latitude right here, 25.97. So then you enter that value right here. For the left side, that's the vertical size of the bounding box. So say the line is going like this. So click anywhere there along your imaginary line. And you get the longitude right here, negative 107.32. So you enter that value right here. Now finally, the right side of the bounding box, again, that's the vertical straight line. So let's say it's along here. So click along your imaginary line. Go down here, you get the longitude, negative 89.66. And then you're going to enter that in the last box. And then so that defines your bounding box. So again, at least for this app for now, the box is a rectangular box where the top and bottom are exactly horizontal. So it's a line of constant latitude along top and bottom. And the right and left sides are exactly vertical lines. They're lines of constant longitude. So that's how that works. It's possible to do a more complicated type shape with osmosis, but for this particular app, I kept it simple and just had lines of constant latitude and longitude. If we need something more complicated with more complicated shapes, then I can probably work on that. But otherwise, I think this would suffice for most use cases. And then after that, as usual, choose your maximum job runtime. For the South Central region, this took about an hour and a half, I think, just as a reference. And again, if you're unsure, just put a large time. The maximum time is 48 hours. and then the job name, and then the output archive location, and then click Run. And then as before, just for repetition, you're going to want to go on your console, go down to the end, and scroll up and find where you have all the text for this. And then find and copy the UUID for the job, and then you can go to your Agave CLI as before, and then refresh the token like that, and then do jobs history-v with and then paste the UUID, and that will allow you to monitor the job. So I think that's pretty much it to know about the Osmosis app. Any questions about that? Okay. So we're talking about basically replacing the files that run in the background for the optimization model. So we can do that easily, but I think it would be nicer to have different, maybe different apps for each case. But I guess we can just go, if we need something quick, we could replace the files. So here's how you would replace the files. So you go to the data depot. The name of this is Optimization Model 2. So we're going to go down here to Optimization Model App 2. This contains all the files for that type of thing.
So Mario, in the optimization module, you have different entries for parameters. For example, you have technology. If we don't need technology, if we don't need that input parameter for the new Julia file, can we just leave it empty, or would that affect the performance of the module?
Let's see. I can't remember if you might have to go through the code or replace the code files with files that don't use that variable, so that it won't complain.
Yeah, I think I see the same thing last time. Yeah, no, it will give you an error, then you need to fill them all out.
Well, if you can elaborate on that process so that we can understand. For example, Maria, she doesn't use a lot of those parameters. So as you said, you could create another Agave app, but assuming that we don't know how to create another Agave app, how we can still handle that.
Well, first of all, I think right now the app form is set so that it requires each input. But I can change that so that each field is optional. So that's one thing to note. Let's see. Let's first do this. That was the first thing that came up. So we're in the folder called Optimization Model App 2. So here are going to be all the files for the model. So for example, you have retrieve data.jl, taboo parameters.csv, ts hssqc.jl. There might be some older files too. See, these two, don't change these two. I'm not too sure if you might have to, or these three. These three aren't model files, but they run before the model runs. And then I also have some of the parameters hard-coded in here. I did that because we were trying to debug some issues with them. So I'll have to go and change that to make sure that it's not using these, that it's using the ones that you input into here. So what you would do is if you want to, say, replace your HSSQC file, you would just delete that. Well, first of all, make sure you have a backup of this old one. If you think we're going to need it again. If you don't, then you can just go to download, and that will download that. And then just make sure you remember where that is. It'll probably be in the downloads folder. And then once you've backed that up, then you can delete. Then once you delete, then you can do add, file upload, and upload the new file. And make sure it's the same name as the old one. So that way it will work with everything else. And it's that simple. As long as there aren't any conflicts or issues with any of the other variables anywhere. Something like that could come up if you make any major changes. And as long as the name of the file stays the same, then that will allow you, when you run this, then it will run using the new file in here. So that's how you would replace the files. So.
But they still, so like, let's say these are variables, right? So like X, Y, and Z. You still need every single variable in that file, right? Otherwise, if you want to work with this app.
I think
or
so.
Will that file affect somehow this layout? I don't think so, because it did it file.
Well, it depends which file.
Well, the one you said, like the unit file. So that's only like solving the optimization model.
Yeah.
That's it, right? So when you're editing it, let's say I download it and I want to edit it, that is going to have the names from the app, and I cannot change those, right?
Right. Okay, what was the other? There is another, I think, part of that.
No, that was just to, I guess, change the optimization model to make the inputs optional. Right. No, I think at least for avoidance application, that would do it, right?
Yeah.
Have you run your model yet?
Here? No.
When you do it,
So to continue on with that line of thought, so here's a definition file for the optimization model app. So it's a JSON file. So I think, I can't remember if we want to make the the fields optional. I can't remember if the inputs have a setting for that, but they might. These are all the inputs up to here. These are the inputs. So these are in the inputs section, and it's all the way down to here. Everything else in the app is a parameter, so that goes under the parameters field. So for example, right here is where you have required true. So if we want to make that optional, we would require false. And then we would change that for each one.
but then you have to let it know.
And then you have to re-register the definition file with the So with the Agave CLI.
And you have to change the HS file, right?
No, you don't have to change that one.
You don't have to.
The HSSQC file?
Yeah,
No.
Julia, right?
This is just for Agave, not for the.
No, because, okay, so let's say you don't give it something, I don't know, like maybe it doesn't have biorefineries anymore or something like that.
Mhm.
Julia file has to change.
Oh well, yeah. I was assuming you had already changed, but yeah. I mean, like this is if I'm assuming that this is if you've already uploaded the new file and now we're trying to modify the Agave files to be compatible with it.
Yeah, so first you would have to change to Julia, and then you would have to change it here, and then theoretically change it.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as there aren't any conflicts. Yeah.
And that JSON file, is that the one that's controlling like what the portal looks like?
Let's see. Well, sort of. What's actually doing that is the metadata file, which is this one. So this is often just a carbon copy of the definition file, but if there are drop-down boxes in the form, then that will show up in the metadata file. So for example, you have the parameter here, which is base year. So this is used to generate the form. So base year is right here. So you can see the label here. It says enter the base year. And then that's what shows up right here. And so, for example, here's the type it expects. It's just a string. Whether or not it's visible, and the default value. I think you only need this if required is true. If required is false, then I don't think you need a default value. As far as modifying the form, I think, so you can actually get rid of, if you want to completely get rid of these canned, or add new ones, you would just do something like this. You add something like this with the different ID and the label you want for it.
And the ID, I'm guessing, matches with the Julia file?
Yeah. So the ID you can find in the wrapper file. So, for example, which one do I want?
The other base is the very first one.
This one?
No, like receive parameters of the very first one is basic. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we'll continue on the example from base year. So you see the ID here is base year. So you go to the wrapper file, and you can see that it's referenced by quotes, or quote, $, bracket, then the ID, and then bracket, or closing bracket, closing quotes. And that's how you reference it. So for example, you call the R script, you call the name of the R script, and then this is the argument to the R script. So here's the command that calls the Julia file. So here's the name of the Julia file. So that's why you have to make sure that the name stays the same. Otherwise it won't work.
So where is the wrapper file located in the Agave CLI folder?
The wrapper file. So if you change the wrapper file, you have to upload that into here, into the folder for the app.
Like all the files to edit the app are right there. Right? That's it.
No, just the wrapper file. So let's see.
Okay, let me see if I'm following. So if I need to modify this, I would download that Grapher file, make the changes, and upload it again under optimization model active.
Yes. Or if you have, you might have it locally, and then you can just modify it locally and then delete this one and upload it. But either one will work, yes. That's if you just want to change the definition. If you want to change the fields, you have to then register the file with the Agave CLI. So what you do is you go to your Agave CLI in your bin folder, open a new terminal, and then you do // I think I might have shown this in another one, I'm not too sure. But apps add update -f, I think. And then you put in the location /file. What is this one? JSON. So you put in the location of replace this with the location of the file. So that's for the definition file. This one. Now for the metadata file, you have to do something similar. Instead of apps add update, you do metadata -add update. Actually, you have kind of gets a little complicated for the metadata, because the metadata is what controls what's shown here in the list of apps. For the metadata, if you don't want a new app to show up, if you wanted to replace the app you already have, you'll have to do metadata -list, I think. And you have that your list -v. And you can scroll to see which metadata corresponds to which app. So this shows up, this displays all of the metadata, like this file, for example, but for each app. So you'll scroll to find your app. So, let's see, where's the name? So, for example, this one, you have the name, ID and name are OSRM extract. So if you wanted to replace this one, you scroll through this and find the name, and then you copy the UUID up here, and then you enter a new command. And you do /metadata -delete, I think, and then paste the ID. Yeah. And then after that you can run metadata -add update -f, and then the location of the new file. Select that, and then that will basically replace the metadata in the database. Otherwise, I think it will add a new one, and then you'll have two versions of the same app.
If you just copy that.
If you just do this without finding the ID and then deleting it, then you'll have basically the same thing, but with a new ID, with a different ID, and it will show up twice.
Like all of the apps, or just that?
But just the one that you, uploaded. For that app, it will show two versions if you don't delete the previous version. It doesn't automatically replace it. It'll just give it a new UUID. And then, for example, So we were doing OSRM extract, so you'll find another OSRM extract over here. That'll basically just be a copy of that. So if you don't want that, then you have to delete the one that's already there first. And then you will only see one OSRM extract over here, and this will be deleted. Now, if you want two different versions of the same app, then you can just do this instead of deleting. But I wouldn't really recommend that. I would recommend, if it's really similar, just copy and pasting the files for the Agave app and then changing them and then changing the name to a different one. So, for example, if you can copy and paste the files for Optimization Model 2 onto your computer and edit them, and then register them to Agave as Optimization Model 3, for example. So I think that's it for that. It's a bit kind of windy road.
Yeah. I got a little lost on the interaction of the optimization model and the OSRM extract.
I was just using different apps as an example. So I was just using, yeah. So yeah, I think that's it for that topic.
Well, on his thesis, but you know, it's something that face-to-face is better, and when you're actually doing the coding, you always have roadblocks things. So yeah, it's always like a VN in the website.
Do we want to maybe start a new video?
Video.